Welcome to Wildspire. You get to be a fly on the wall for my intimate conversations with entrepreneurs who are changing the world. I'm your host, Stephanie Benedetto, coach, storyteller, and unmarketer at The Awakened Business, helping coaches and change-making entrepreneurs unleash their inspired message and share it with playful unmarketing. I'll ask curious questions and explore uncharted waters with my guest today. Anything can happen when we step into the unknown of infinite creativity, and that's where we're going to play. Today I have a conversation with Chris Westfall. We talk about writing impossible books, what always makes things easier, and being at our best. A bit about Chris Westfall. Chris is one of the most sought-after business coaches and keynote speakers in the world. He has helped launch over 6 businesses and has appeared on ABC News, NBC TV, and CNN. He has worked with thousands of leaders at Fortune 500 companies, nonprofit organizations, and high-tech startups. A coach to entrepreneurs and executives around the globe, his clients have appeared on Shark Tank, Dragon's Den, and Shark Tank Australia. He regularly consults with top-tier universities and is the author of 3 other books, including Leadership Language. Now, we will talk a bit in this conversation about his most recent book, Easier. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Chris Westfall. Hi, Chris. Welcome to Wildspire Podcast. You're on my turf now, man. You better prepare.
Prepare for what? Prepare for anything. That's the
anything.
Answer.
That's right. Anything. I have no idea. Yeah. So I do want to start with the book. I need to hear the story of the book. So it's right behind you. On video, you'll be able to see it. Easier, right? And it has a subtitle. What's the subtitle?
The subtitle is 60 Ways to Make Your Work Life Work for You.
As I recall, Easier was an impossible project.
That is correct.
So what about writing that book made it seem impossible to you?
Just about everything. It wasn't the book that I set out to write. It wasn't the book that I pitched to Wiley, the publisher. I pitched a book on 100 ways to create the future of work or something along those lines.
So you ran out of, no, I'm just.
That's right. I couldn't get there. Well, I totally changed my approach to the book because I started trying to write these like little, basically it was like blog posts, and it felt like I was scolding people or telling people how to live their lives. And I was just like, this is not only do I not want to write this book, I would never want to read it. I couldn't create something like that. And I said, I got to stop. I got to step back. What if this was a story? What if this was a conversation? What if I, just from an impossible standpoint, decided to do what I've never done before, and that is I created characters and wrote dialogue and made a business fable. So it was purely a creative exercise, but it was also, through this creative exploration, the most authentic thing that I have ever written, ever in my life. And it's a story about a coach and a client. And the client's frustrated. The client is feeling what a lot of people are feeling right now. Frustration, which happens to be related to career frustration, unable to make an impact, not sure what's next, wanting to maybe start his own business. So he hires a coach. And from this premise, the conversation begins. Little does the client know that in just 5 days, he's about to be fired. So
I know you dropped that little hint right at the beginning, like, ooh, the intrigue.
Well, because I think if you're going to write a book called Easier, there needs to be some difficulty because life is difficult. And for me, the ultimate difficulty would be to get fired. And so from these difficult circumstances, the coach and the client go on a journey where they both share their own difficulties and manage to find a way out of some difficult circumstances. And at the end of the book, it's not tidy. It's not like some Hollywood ending because that's not how life works. I wanted to step into as best I could what I was seeing as the most authentic thing that I could share. And authenticity to me, which is a word that's bounced around a lot, but for me, it didn't look authentic to make it have a tidy, buttoned up ending to the story. Yet in the ending, and hopefully throughout, in the midst of difficult circumstances, easier is what is discovered. And that's not to say that life is easy or getting fired is easy or some of the other losses and challenges that are faced in the story are easy. No, that's a bridge too far. But there's a way to show up in every circumstance that makes things easier. And that's what I wanted to capture. So the subtitle was given to me by the publisher. And I didn't know how many ways were going to show up. I didn't know if it was going to be 100 ways or 60 ways to leave your lover. I didn't know. And that was just what showed up. But I made a deal with myself. I said, if it's not in the story, it doesn't exist. If it doesn't come out of who these people are and what it is that they're facing and how the conversation leads them. So like if I wanted to present a quote from a book, they had to walk into the library, pull the book off a shelf and look at it.
Cool.
So yeah, and it was just kind of a creative assignment that I said, I'm going to see if I can do this. And here it is. And it was a creating the impossible project for me. And it's, another creating the impossible journey for me, a creative exploration. And I'm so glad that I went through it because it was, in many ways, it was very cathartic for me to express some of the things that I had seen as a coach, but also that I had seen as a client, working with some of the people that you've had on your show, but some of the things that I've seen on both sides of the conversation, as well as some new insights and an opportunity to share some of the things that I went through over the course of the pandemic. So this is a book, I think, at its heart, that's about healing and it's about personal freedom. At least that's what I take from it. But everybody who reads it has a different journey. They have their own personal experience of it. But I tell people this is the book that I needed to write, but it's also the book that I need to read. Yeah.
So what is it, Chris, that makes life easier when it's hard, especially?
For me, it's understanding a couple of things. One is that you don't have to go it alone. Because when life gets really difficult is when I feel like it's all up to me. And I had and it's a story that I share in the book. I had a conversation with my coach. I was talking to her about my frustrations and challenges and how I was basically trying to lift the world by myself. Lift the world, spin it around, tear it in half, whatever it was that I was up to, on about. And she said to me, she shared a story about surfing, which is fascinating to me because I'm from the Midwest, a long way from the ocean. But I've been in the ocean and I understand how surfing works, even though I'm not a surfer. And she says, one of the things that surfers always say is that the wave always comes to you. And I thought about that for a second and I said, well, that's true, but only 100% of the time. Why is it that I am trying to create all the waves? Why is it that I'm trying to create the ocean or boil the ocean and lift the world by myself? Why is it that it feels like it's all up to me? That doesn't feel easier at all. But I came to have, I guess, just an understanding from this little surfing metaphor, which isn't really a metaphor at all. It's the way things work, is that there's a kindness in the design of the way things work, of the way that the ocean works, that, you, of course, if the wave's going to come to you, you can't be sitting on the beach watching the waves hit the shore. You have to be out in the waves. You have to be, ready to experience those things. But that, to me, looks like what makes things easier. When we see that we are not alone, when we see that there is a kindness in the design, when we see that it's not all up to us, when we see, and I hope this doesn't feel like it's a bridge too far, but this is the way it looks like to me, when we see that the universe has our back things get easier. And this is coming from a guy who feels at times it's felt like the universe has stabbed me in the back, kicked me in the face, thrown me up against the fence. I mean, whatever. We've all had our times. I've had my share, and I'm sure there's more ahead. But in the middle of it all, I'm still here. Resilience exists. Hope always exists, even when I don't always see it. We say all hope is lost. False. Hope always exists, just like easier always exists. Hard is a habit, but there's always an easier way. We just don't see it. And when I say we, I really need to say I just don't see it. But easier always exists. And reminding myself of that fact and that understanding, for me, it makes things easier.
You said there were a couple of things. That was one, or are there more?
Let's see. So to unpack it, you don't have to go it alone.
Uh-huh.
The universe has your back.
Uh-huh.
The wave always comes to you.
Okay.
Is this making sense?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to. I mean, there have been times in my life where it's sort of like a boat. If you're on a boat that's a sailboat, the wind takes the sails, the wind pushes the boat. It's not up to me to stand on the boat and blow into the sails to make the boat go forward. That's not how sailing works. And it's also something that I've come to realize that's not how life works. So that I guess has been something that has been very helpful to me, is to understand that the universe has my back, even when times are tough, relationships don't go like I want, the coaching call doesn't happen the way that I want it to, et cetera, et cetera. There's a resilience and a resourcefulness that's built into the system, that's built into us. And that to me is something that makes things easier.
Yeah. I see that too. There's something that I like what you said. There's always easier. The minute that I can think it, and that isn't all the time, that isn't necessarily in the midst of something that's feeling really hard, but sometimes it is. The minute it enters my consciousness that, oh, what would make this a little easier? Or what else? There's a little space that opens up. And I think to me, that's where I see easier, is in space, is in a breath between thoughts, is in just a little bit of a gap before I head back into the noise in my head. Like that's just a little easier. There's always a little relaxation available in the tension that I might be experiencing in the moment, and that lets it be easier. And it sounds like a small thing, but it's like eternity opens up from that little tiny space.
It's true. It's a space of possibility. And this is the thing. I've been saying this. I was telling you, I've been doing these keynotes and stuff, and I'll stand on stage, and it doesn't matter what audience I ask this question. They shout it out from the audience. And here's a question that I ask. In this moment right now, how many possibilities exist? And they shout it out. It's either, two answers. It's either endless or infinite. So take your pick. But they shout it out. And that's really true. But when things are hard, when things are difficult, the tunnel vision comes in. And I don't see that. I don't see those infinite possibilities that are part of the design. I mean, we could talk about anything. We could talk about avocados. We could talk about Justin Bieber. We could talk about anything. The possibilities are endless.
Yeah, you brought up Justin Bieber.
I know, you were hoping.
And avocados.
For those of you playing at home, you can check that off on your bingo box. Justin Bieber. I don't know where that came from. I'm sorry. I have no idea.
Where do those things come from, Chris?
What a great question.
Like, what do you think? What do you see in that?
So I sat down with a neuroscientist, a guy who studies the brain, and I was listening to him talk about all this brain science. His name's David Eagleman. He wrote a book called Live Wired, and I feature it in Easier because it's absolutely the most inspirational book that I've read in 10 years, but that's a whole nother story. Sorry about that, Michael Neal. Anyway, somebody was thinking it. I thought I'd just say it. I love my man, Michael Neal. But I was talking to David Eagleman, and he was sharing with me all these insights into the way that our brain works. And I asked him this question. I said, so where does thought come from? And he said to me, and this is my answer to you as well, we still have no idea.
Oh my God.
And that is my answer. Where those ideas come from, where the creativity comes from, where whatever it is that I am going to say next comes from, it's all the same place. It's called the unknown. And even one of the foremost neuroscientists in the world tells us that we still do not know where thoughts come from. And I say, isn't that fantastic? Isn't that the beautiful, rich mystery and tapestry of life that from nothing is something, and it's on its way, and it's fantastic. So that's what shows up for me when you say, where did thoughts come from? My absolutely best scientific answer is, I don't know, and neither does anyone else.
You saw me throwing a little party when you gave that answer. I love it. I love that I don't know that. I love that I can be completely surprised by what enters my mind next and what comes out of my mouth. That is amazing. I used to, when I would do presentations or I would teach and I would do trainings, especially if it was going to be, one of those where I was in front of a big group of people, I would memorize things. I would rehearse so much until I knew it forward and backward. And I never really thought about it consciously. I don't know when I stopped doing that, but at some point it just stopped looking like it was a good idea. And now it's actually fun to do just as much preparation as is necessary, which might vary. It might be none, or it might be some. Because when I show up in that space, like this conversation, I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't know what will occur to me after I hear whatever you're going to say. And sometimes if I show up with myself and with the world as if I don't know, I get to see something really cool.
I'm with you. It's that discovery. And I am so with you. I had a client that I was working with, and I did, well, I won't get into the details, but suffice it to say, it was this very, very large presentation with multiple presenters. And they came to me and they said, 6 weeks before the event, Chris, please give us your slides and tell us what you're going to say. I said, let me get this straight. So you want me to do a presentation in front of 250 people that I've never met with a company I'm just beginning to work with, and you want me to tell you right now what it is that I'm going to talk about? And I'm like, not only is that not in your best interest, but it's also, it's not the way that we work at our best. And I tried to convey that, and I wasn't really able to explain it effectively. I'm working on my communication skills. Anyway, Stephanie, leave me alone. I'm just kidding. No. I wasn't able to explain it effectively, but I simply said, I'll give you my slides at a later date, and I need to drive it off of my own computer, and I need to have, I just, all these kinds of barriers to point towards, at least for me, what looks like the most effective way to share ideas, which is exactly the way that you are expressing them, from a place of identity rather than from an agenda or something preordained or something that is locked in and set up. And I had to learn that I could do that, because I was a lot like you. I was memorized. I had it all, it was all planned out and all that kind of stuff. And one day I was doing a training in front of a senior executive team for a financial institution. Anyway, I was working with a bunch of senior executives. 8-hour training. I walked in, I had 5 slides, which, and my spider sense was tingling. This is not enough slides. You need to have this planned out. You need to know what you're going to say. What are you going to open with? How are you going to do? And that's not to say that I went in there all willy-nilly, that I had no idea of any kind of structure that I wanted to create, but I saw something that was stronger than structure, that was more impactful than an agenda. Because nobody cares about a well thought out agenda. I hate to say that, but it's true. It's just giving people a roadmap of when they can check their phones. And I want to keep people on their toes. You know why? Because it's where we really learn. It's where we make discoveries. And I say we, because when I'm on stage and in this place, I'm making discoveries too. And the first discovery that I make is that when we speak from a place of identity, in other words, who we are, which is not an ego exercise, but when we speak from our humanity and from our human nature, we can point to the nature of things. And when we point at the nature of things and when we come to a deeper understanding, that's where real results come from. I mean, look, if life were a 6-step process, if life were scripted, wouldn't that be wonderful? But it's not. It's not. So why do we show? And I do a lot of presentation coaching with folks. In fact, after we get done here, I'm doing presentation coaching. And a lot of times people show up and they've got their presentation voice on. I'm giving a presentation, and so this is the way that I need to speak. And they're using flowery language, and it's, and it's like, I understand what you're going for, and I understand that you're trying to accomplish something with these $12 words. But when we are plain spoken, when we are at our best, is when we show up as nothing more and nothing less than the miracle that we are. Period. I keep this note right here beside me. This is a note from my coach, the surfer. She says this to me. What is the miracle I want to be used for? What is the miracle that wants to use me? I'm not a big keep quotes on my desk kind of guy, but this one was too good. I couldn't leave it alone. When we show up and step into that miracle that wants to use us, that's when the presentation comes through us. That's when the book comes through us. That's when the conversation comes through us. That's when the opportunity is seen in a new way. At least that's been my experience. So.
And it's not just books and presentations that we can show up for that way. It's everything. We can live that way. It's like on the edge is not the right word, but it kind of feels like an edge because it's got a freshness to it. Mm-hmm. The emergence of the moment, the what's happening now edge, instead of replaying something in my head that I've been planning for or dreading and living from that and creating from that. It's creating like a blank page in front of me in every moment.
Some people are scared by that, Stephanie.
Yeah, I was. That's the whole reason why I was rehearsing and practicing and planning. I thought that if I didn't,
what would happen?
I know, like nothing, I don't know what would happen. Like nothing would have happened. I wouldn't have known what to say because the whole thing was up to me. But what you started out with, it just does not, Not only does it not look that way to me anymore, it's just really clear to me that it isn't that way. That isn't what happens. It's what happens when I get caught up in my thinking. That's where I get stuck, but not in this moment, not when I'm really showing up here authentically with what is. No, there's always something that meets me there. It's often not what I would have expected, but there's always something that meets me there, that the miracle is ready to use me, and I'm available when I'm here and open to it.
I think a lot of people think that it takes courage to do what you're describing. See, I would say no as well.
No, it's like, what is that though, Chris? Because you and I can say that. And I get that it looks like it takes courage when it looks like it's a scary thing to do. When it looks like it's a risky thing to do, it would take courage. When was it? What was it that you saw? What was it that I saw? I'm asking myself. You know, I don't think I did it overnight. Like for me, it wasn't overnight. It was like a little bit at a time, just noticing. Because the thing is, we live with this design, we live with this equipment every single day. We sometimes are caught up in our thoughts, and sometimes we're just really present and quiet, and maybe more, maybe less, depending on your experience on any given day. Right. But if you notice it, you notice what it's really like to be caught up when you're caught up, and you notice what it's like to be quiet, and you start to see how it feels and what life is like when you're living it in each of those experiences. Doing that for me, I started to see, oh, something shows up for me when I'm not noisy and caught up. Something is supporting me. Something occurs to me. For most people who haven't really looked at this, they know it because you ask them, where do you get your best ideas? And not when you're pushing and forcing and trying at the computer or, wherever it is that you're trying to make something happen in the midst of a meeting where you're debating and arguing, right? It can happen there too, but usually people will go, oh, I'm in the shower. I'm on a run. I'm walking my dog. I'm playing with my kids. And it's like, bam, what's that about?
For me, creativity creativity shows up when I get out of my own way, when I am not on my mind, when the only way that I was able to create the story of easier is by dropping out of the story that was running through my head, whatever it was at any given time. And what was surprising to me, and I suspect you've experienced this, but when I went away, and I'm speaking the ego exercise, or however you want to view that. I don't know that I have the words to really describe it, but when I am not on my mind, what shows up is service. What showed up was this book. And I couldn't have created this book without that understanding. And as a result, that understanding is hopefully woven into the very fabric of the book, because that's the place where it was created from. And when we understand it's not about courage. It's easier than courage. Courage implies bravery. Like courage is running into a burning building. Courage is what allows us to face real and legitimate risks, not the challenges that we make up for ourselves in our minds. And that I make up. I mean, I've created prisons, museums, statues, all kinds of things, all kinds of stories running through here. None of them very useful. When I recognize that it doesn't take courage, it's easier than that. It's really about doing the one thing that is always easier. And that is, I think, stepping into our identity as human beings who are able to access this mysterious place where thought comes from that remains a mystery. And yet we talk about it, we point to it, we understand it when we experience it. that place is not, it's not a journey. It's not it's not a 6-step process. It's not an exercise in courage. It's simply an understanding that it's who we are when we aren't on our minds.
I found it interesting that you were using that word identity, and I think in a different way than I usually do. And you elaborated as you were going, and I was like, oh, the way you were using identity was like what we really are.
Correct. Not the numbers in your bank account or the title on your business card or whatever that might be, whatever your website says about you. I'm talking about our humanity. I'm talking about our human nature in the same way that I would talk about nature, that like the perfection that we see in a flock of birds, or the way that the waves hit the shore, or the way that acorns turn into oak trees. That same energy is inside of you and me. And yet instead of seeing ourselves as part of the perfection of this nature, instead of seeing our human nature, I often see myself as an error that needs to be corrected. I'm a variance that needs to be whacked back into shape. Well, where's the kindness in that? What is it about that makes things easier? You know, there's a quote that I share in the book, and I want to share it with you because it's been something that has really made a huge difference for me. And it's a quote from someone by the name of George Eliot. And George Eliot said, "It's never too late to be who you might have been." And what's really interesting about this quote, several things about it, is that George Eliot's real name was Marianne Evans, right? Marianne Evans. And she wrote under the pseudonym George Eliot. She wrote during the Victorian era. So like around the time of the American Civil War in England was when she was writing. But this idea that it's never too late to be who you might have been is a call on, there's just multiple levels to it. But for me, it says you can step into this identity anytime that you're ready. This identity that is part of a universe that seems to have some kindness, that seems to have some resilience and resourcefulness built into it. That's not to say that life is easy. That's not to say that disappointments don't exist, or that hardship doesn't exist. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that it's never too late to be who you might have been, that it's never too late to step into the miracle that wants to use you. And I'm not speaking of miracle in a traditional sort of religious sense. I'm talking about the miracle that you can see inside a child's eyes, the miracle that happens when you're able to get across town in 45 minutes instead of an hour and a half. There are miracles all around us, simple, everyday miracles that are happening in a way that I find not only comforting, but I'm going to say makes things easier. What do you think of that quote? It's never too late to be who you might have been. What do you hear in that in terms of identity?
It has a lot in it that I'm fighting.
Say more.
Because
Stephanie is conflicted.
Because there's this idea of, that's why I'm like sitting with it. And it's sometimes fun to sit with things like that I, on the surface, let's say, would like disagree with or have like a something with. Because if I sit with it long enough, I can see something else underneath it. So maybe we'll do that a bit since you asked me about it. It has this idea of late. Too late. Can you be late for now? So she's saying you're it's never too late, right? Okay, cool. To be who you would have been?
Who you might have been, yeah.
Who you might have been? It's never too late to be who you might have been. I'm confused by it, actually. That's how it sits with me. Because in this moment, I can't really think of who I might have been or even who I would be. So, I mean, I could look at it a certain way and I'm like, okay, I feel that. What I feel in the message is now. That's what I feel in the message now. Like this. Here is where it happens. This is where you do it. This moment. And it's never too late for now. Like that's what I receive in it. The wording of it. I'm like, you know, I might have been. Like, how could I have? I mean, like infinite possibilities, but this is it right here, you know. And there's something that maybe this comes into. I think we can leap off into what you were talking about active and passive in creativity, right? Do you see how it kind of, it's like, I think because I hear might have been and I feel regret, or I'm making up regret in might have been and too late, even though the message is it's not too late.
For me, here's what shows up is this, and you know, George Eliot, one of the greatest writers of the Victorian era, and I'm going to rewrite George Eliot. Says to me,
I couldn't read the time. Yeah.
To be who you are. That's what shows up to me.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
No, I know what you mean. Like might have been. There's, yeah, I hear the regret in that. And there's no, I don't think that there's, no, I would never call people to point them towards regret. It's a call for us to be right here, right now.
Well, that's what so that was really cool for me to be with that for just a little longer, because I heard it. I heard now, which is exactly the rewrite, which is exactly what you were hearing in it. Do you know? But I needed to, my own words. And like, what if we could see things in life that way instead of rejecting them outright and saying, I don't agree with that, or that doesn't make sense to me. Just sit with it a little bit longer for the truth that everything rests on. The truth that it's pointing to, which maybe I would put it into different words. Cool. But I liked that.
I just wonder how to know when it's time to sit and contemplate and when it's time to take action. This goes back to what we were talking about before, and you've spoken to the conversation too about this idea of taking the time to let things settle a little bit. I mean, you're supposed to be interviewing me, but I'm made of questions. How do you know?
I am interviewing the man who is made of questions. This is a conversation, Chris. This is not an interview.
Oh, thank God.
With the program.
Check that off my list here. It seems to me that it's easy for me to fall into the trap of my thinking that says, how will I know when to take action? How will I know when to step back? How will I know? And that's the word that I need to fixate on, because it's the word that I need to get rid of. What if you don't know? This is the thing that I admire about you. You bravely go into the unknown. You do. Look at you making a face.
I'm making a face at brave. Like, you know, you were saying it takes courage if it looks like it's going to kill you, if you're running into a burning building. If it looks scary, then it takes courage.
I just admire it. I think that it's something that I aspire to engage with more, is that understanding that courage isn't required and that the unknown is okay. I mean, I write about it, but I still wrestle with it, you know? Yeah.
And when you ask that question, like, how do we know when it's time to move? I've been in experiments, and I have a friend who did a very extreme version of this experiment. I do lots of experiments. His experiment was being so still and to perfect the art of waiting, not necessarily passively doing nothing waiting, but like being still inside to the point where he would not move until he knew he was being moved, until he couldn't stop himself from acting. He shared this with me 2.5 years ago, and we had it wasn't an argument, but it was a strong exchange of differing perspectives. Let's put it that way. I was like, what are you talking about? Just get off your ass and do something, right? Like, what are you sitting on your butt waiting for? I don't get it. Because I see that sometimes we make things so precious. And so there's so much on it that I can't do this unless I know it's going to work, right? That's what we're really saying. It's not just that I know to do, it's going to get me the result that I want. That's not on offer.
Yeah, ever. Yeah.
Guaranteed result, not on, I mean, I've yet to see somebody. There are people who will tell you, we can point to past scenarios and do percentages and run the odds, but I've yet to see somebody who can predict the future accurately every single time, or even most of the time accurately. So that's not on offer. Like, what are you waiting for, dude? Just do something. But I have since come to see that in my own experiments of kind of randomly doing shit and throwing stuff out there, that I have discovered something that way that my friend was exploring through stillness. And what I've discovered is that there's a pulse of life. There's a feeling of things. There's the wave that's for me. And I can kind of tell, I get a sense, I have more of a sense of what it is. So there's less of me flailing about and just randomly doing stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I like that. Sometimes I really like that. Just trying things to see what happens. But there's less of that. It's not necessary. Like, I know which waves are mine. I know when it's time for me to stand up. And it comes from standing up at the quote unquote wrong time.
Yeah.
It's not a wrong time. It's just a feel. And I think I like the surfer analogy so much. It's not just an analogy. It's like there is a rhythm and a flow of life. And when I'm in it, it happens me. And there's something easy about it, even when there are challenges. And when I'm not in it, it's like swimming against the current or trying to get up on a board when I'm not a surfer either. This is going to fall apart. But like, you know, it's not, the timing's all wrong, right, and you don't catch the wave. And there's something to that, getting a feel for it. And there's so much less that's required of us than I thought. There's less that's required of me. I can feel the winds change. I felt this recently in my business, like, whoop, you're going this way now, Steph. I'm like, what? Where did that come from? It's like the sails, the wind in my sails, just the direction, it changed a lot. And I feel it. I felt it before I could think about it. And I find myself moving from it without even knowing. And that's, to me, that's kind of what I'm seeing about active and passive. But if someone is sitting and doing nothing and being precious about it, I'm like, just get in the game, because you're going to learn so much about getting that feel for the life that's yours and how you want to live it. This, by the way, is just my experience. It's not the way it is.
Right. My experience is similar, though. Yeah. There's, you know it when you know it, and you don't intellectually know it. That's that inner knowing that, you know, that's when it's time for the relationship goes to the next level, the business goes to the next level, it just goes to a different direction. It's not necessarily about levels. It's about exploration. And when life is more of a journey and more about exploration rather than achievement or milestones or things like that, there's a richness to us that shows up. At least that's been my experience. Yeah. And sometimes life becomes inevitable. In other words, you know that you have to do that thing. You have to write that book. You have to sing that song. You have to write that poem. You have to do whatever it is that you do. You have to complete that land survey. You have to heal that sick chihuahua, whatever it is that you're on about. Many paths. But I love what you said about experiments. And when I look at life as an experiment, like a scientist, when an experiment fails, I'm more informed. It's not about my hypothesis needs to be right. And it's stepping in and trying to enjoy the experiments. And that's what has shown up for me since this book has come out. It's been a few months now. And I have to say, things are different. Stephanie, I'm not repeating patterns from the past. I don't go into situations and go, I feel like I've been here before. I know what this is about. I know where the bodies are buried. And and I don't know what it is or why it is or how it is, but it just is that I am experiencing a newness at a stage in my life that I never expected. And part of me goes, well, it's because of the book. And part of me goes, no, it's not. It's just life. There happens to be a book. I've written books before, whatever. But that is what has been so, I guess, extraordinary for me, is that in running these experiments that, as you say, which is kind of how I'm looking at my life these days, the journey has brought me someplace new. And I don't know that I can describe it in any more detail other than that, except to say that there is a freshness, there is an authenticity, there is an unexpectedness that is not frightening or concerning or troubling. It's exciting. It's like going to a restaurant that you've never been to before. And everything you try is just, it's fantastic until you try something that's not fantastic and you go, not that. And one of the things that I've learned later in life is that if it's not that, I don't keep eating it. I do not keep, oh, the milk's sour. Let me get the whole jug. Let me just see if I can get the whole thing in. No. And what makes this so extraordinary in my mind is that it is ordinary, that it is life. It is life that is on offer for us every day, every moment. And that is, I guess what I'm trying to, I'm going to say that the wrong way. That is the experience that I have tapped into recently, just where I'm at on my journey and trying to explore and run more experiments and just enjoying the journey along the way. A journey that's freer. And what I mean by that is that it's freer from obligation, which is not to say that I don't have obligations. I have deadlines. I have appointments. I have a calendar that, all this kind of stuff. But what I guess I'm trying to say is that my relationship with my obligations can change, especially when I see life as more of experiments, more of a wave that comes to me. And I'll be the first to admit, I don't always do it. Sometimes this thing that I'm describing with clarity right now is quite cloudy at other times. But it's always there. Like easier, it's always there. Like the South Pole. I'm not at the South Pole right now, but it's always there. Always been there. It's one of the stories I tell in the book. They discovered it, like I think in 1911, they discovered the South Pole. Guess what? They didn't discover it. It was always there. They just arrived there. Anyway, that's just where I'm at in my journey.
I like that. And I just want to say, in case this stuff feels exciting, what we're talking about feels really exciting, but too much or too scary, there's always a little easier. There's always a little experiment in this moment. There's always just a question like, what if I didn't? Or what if I tried that? It can be that simple. That's how kind it is. That's how kind this thing is. There's no rule that you have to do it like you or me.
Right. It's not an obligation or a direction.
Right.
Run an experiment with your life. That's absolutely not. But I love the way you're talking about things in very small. Is there an opportunity to zoom out just a little bit?
Yeah. Get a little curious. Little curious. Pause just a moment before you jump to the old assumption or habit or thing you've said a million times. Stay with something for just a moment to see what meets you there. And there's something that will surprise you. There's something that meets you there. I know that. I've seen it so many times. But you have to open up that space. But you know what? It's going to happen anyway. Just notice it. There isn't even a space you have to open up. We do it all the time. We're living in that flow, in and out all day long, every day of our lives. And just this conversation calls our attention to it a little bit more, is an invitation to it. Yeah.
It feels like what you're talking about is acceptance, of accepting that newness rather than squashing it and replacing it with yesterday's news or last week's behaviors, because that looks like on the surface it might be easier. That's not easier. It's not. Easier is stepping into the space that you're talking about, the space of discovery, because that's, especially if you're up against it when things are tough.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you wrote that book, Chris, for all the reasons, to share that message, but also for what it allowed you to live.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. It's been something that I stepped into, the experience of creating that impossible project. And I continue to step into it every day, because it deepens my understanding of exactly what it is that we're talking about. And who doesn't want things to be easier? I do every day. And I think this is a conversation about making things easier and understanding that discovery is also always available. That crossroads that you talked about, that sort of that moment before the old thinking shows up. That's the place I want to go to there. That is the place I want to be. Where that creativity shows up. And I'll just say it. One of the things that really has helped me to access this place that we're talking about, the discussion that we're having, the book that I wrote, and so many things that I've done has been because I've found coaches that have helped me to create, to understand that I don't have to go it alone. And that's one of the things that I think is so wonderful about the creative space that you provide, and you've provided it to me today. And I'm deeply grateful. I really am. Because you never know what might show up inside of a conversation. That is by nature an experiment. An experiment and an opportunity. Every conversation in my mind is an opportunity, which is not to say, and so go look at every conversation like a transaction. That's how you should see it. No, incorrect. It's an opportunity for discovery. For discovery. And there are mysteries and wonders on offer in this place of creativity, this place of discovery, this place of possibility, the place that we're speaking of that we really can't describe precisely, but we do the best we can to point at it. But it's not something that's reserved for you or for me or just for people who write books or people who run corporations. It's not. It's part of our human nature. It's part of the universe's design. A design that's resourceful, that's resilient, that's turning acorns into oak trees, making the waves hit the shore. I'm not doing that, and I never have to. It's not up to me. And that makes
it easier. Thank you so much, Chris. So, where can people find you? Where's the best place for them to find you if they want to see what you're up to?
Well, I wish they wouldn't, because I hate people. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. I'm teasing, of course. You can find out more about me on my website, westfallonline.com. You can find out about Easier on the book's website, which is easier-book.com. You can also find it on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, or anywhere fine books are sold.
Because your book is fine, honey.
I mean, that might be a bridge too far. Go in there and ask them about it.
Yeah, I will share all the links too.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, and I also have a YouTube channel where I share a lot of ideas too. youtube.com/Westfall Online. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Chris.
Well, thank you. So great to speak with you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining me for today's Wildspire conversation. If you'd like to receive a weekly Wildspire email from me filled with inspiring stories, unmarketing experiments, tips for playing your way to impact and income without the hustle and hype, insights from my spiritual business journey, and more, go to theawakenedbusiness.com/Wildspire. Until next time, may you know yourself as the gorgeous wild creation you are.